From the creators who brought you RuPaul's Drag Race and Million Dollar Listing, this is World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome one and all to the Wow Report here on Radio Andy. I am Tom Campbell. I'll be your host today because Fenton Bailey, our fearless leader, is flying around the world. He's in a VIP airport lounge right now making a deal somewhere in Europe. I just know he is. And joining me this week, as every week, is Club Kid turned best-selling author James St. James.
I have nowhere else to be. I have no better thing to be doing. I'm always here for you, Tom.
Thank you. And speaking of just a regular contributor, the backbone of the Wow Report, really, our producer and on-air correspondent, Blake Jacobs.
Hi, and my Learjet is in the parking lot.
Yeah, that's right. We're here to do our civic duty, which we do every week, which is to count down the top 10 things that made us go, wow. And let's jump right into it at number 10.
Number 10.
Cher has a new memoir out. It's called Cher, the Memoir, Part 1. And I have to confess, I have not read the book yet. Either has Cher. How do I know this? Because I saw Cher on Monday night at the Saban Theater. I shared air with Cher, as Blake so poetically said. She's doing a promotional tour. I'm sure you've seen some of it online. She's been on Howard Stern. She's been on Graham Norton. And she's talking about her book. And I had bought the tickets, in the wee hours of the morning sometime in October when they came available. And I went away on a trip, which I'll talk about in my next segment for Thanksgiving. But I landed at the airport at LAX at 6:10. I got to the Saban Theater by 8 o'clock. My sister's visiting, and we saw Cher. Now, a cynical part of me is like, what am I, Tom Campbell, Cher fan since birth, not going to know about Cher? Well, I'll tell you some fun things I learned during the talk. Again, this is without reading the book, which I read is a very good book. What I've read is a very good book. The highlights of our conversation with the host was Turner Classic Movies. Jacqueline Stewart was there. So she's in LA for a lot. Now, did you know, and tell me if you know, because you probably do, that as a baby, Cher spent time in an orphanage?
I did not know that.
No.
Her father, Pakistani man who ended up having sort of a drug problem, he got her mother, the famous Georgia, pregnant. She was going to have an abortion. Georgia, this is where we share the fetus, and on the table she had second thoughts, and she ran off the table, and so she ended up having Cher. And then her father brought her mother and Cher to Scranton, Pennsylvania, which Cher doesn't even like the Valley. And he at one point, because they were very, very poor and he was struggling, he said, I'm going to go to New York to get money and I'll be back. He never came back. And before he left, he put Cher in an orphanage because Georgia had to get a job to make money. And then Georgia got sick for a couple of weeks and couldn't visit her daughter in the orphanage, and then the nuns wouldn't let her have Cher.
I didn't know any of this, and I'm fascinated by it. I just, what a horrible thing that a mother misses, can't come for 2 weeks, and then you never see her child.
And Georgia ended up becoming friends with a councilman, which I don't know this for a fact. She didn't say this, but Georgia was hot and had many husbands. So I'm thinking like she got some councilman hot for her, and they did a prison break for Cher. So I didn't know that Cher has spent time in an orphanage. Now, Cher's 3 biggest influences: Dumbo, Cinderella, and Elvis. Her first movie she ever saw was Dumbo. She told her mother in the car on the way home, I want to be Dumbo. I know what I want to do. I want to be Dumbo. She goes, well, Dumbo's an elephant, so it's going to be hard for you. So the next movie she saw was Cinderella, and she was like, I'm in. And she's a girl. I can be Cinderella. I want to sing. I want attention. I want to have pretty gowns. And then her mother, she talked about watching Turner Classic Movies, which she loves, and she never really found women. She's great women, she said, but I didn't really relate to the women. I related to the men. And at 11 years old, her mother brought her to an Elvis concert, and she goes, all the girls wanted to be with Elvis. She goes, I wanted to be Elvis. Doesn't that make perfect sense?
It does make
Cher.
If you combine Cinderella with Elvis, you get Cher.
Yes, with a little touch of Dumbo. And then I didn't know this, and maybe you did. This is a fact. But Sonny and Cher, who I Got You, Babe, was a huge hit in 1965. They were part of the British invasion. They're American. They were crazy. Sonny was a producer. They lived together. They wore those hippie clothes. Americans did not like them. And so the head of Shindig and a guy named Mick Jagger said, you need to come over to the UK. And Cher said, the first week we were in every newspaper. The second week, our song was on the charts, and we ended up knocking the Beatles off the charts as number one. And so after they had that victory lap in the UK, they came to America, and now they were endorsed because they were part of this crazy mod British thing, which I thought was kind of fascinating. She name drops throughout the entire thing. She makes fun of herself because she's like, I forget to say their last name. So I'm going to say the first name and see if you can say the last name. Okay. Jack.
Nicholson.
Yes. David.
Foster.
No.
David Arquette.
Geffen.
Yeah, of course.
Francis.
Farmer.
Bean.
Ford Coppola. He came backstage in Vegas and said, you need to be an actress. Cher never disappoints. I really thought I have been oversaturated with Cher my entire life. This is going to be not an interesting night. It was fascinating. She's an amazing storyteller, and the women and the gays and the people that she brings into her audience and talks about what she's been through. She's not like a whiny celebrity that she earned everything she's gotten, and we treat women horribly. And Cher, that great line where her mother said, Cher, you need to marry a rich man. She goes, Mom, I am a rich man. So God bless her for that. And if you haven't seen this, you need to Google it right now. Josh Brolin, Graham Norton, Cher, Barbara Streisand. They were recently on the Graham Norton show, and Josh Brolin, they brought up Barbara Streisand, and Josh Brolin and Cher on the couch. And Josh goes to Cher, do you know her? Do you know Barbara? And Cher goes, yeah. And then looks at the camera like and he goes, oh my God, one syllable answer. Anyway, Cher rules. I am going to read her book, Cher the Memoir, Part 1, Part 2 coming out next year. God bless Cher and the world that we get to live in a world with Cher.
I do think it's interesting that it seems like every December lately we get a icon autobiography drop. Last year, if you remember, it was Barbara and Brittany. And this, and then we had Rue, and now we have this. And yes. I'm hoping next year we get Liza. I hope that we just continue this trend.
Documentary coming out.
We have the documentary coming out, so it would be nice if she had a book as well.
All right. And our countdown, let's move on now to number 9.
Number 9.
I saw Gladiator II at the theater, and I was a little worried because I'd never seen Gladiator 1. I am not a Russell Crowe fan. It did not interest me at all. But you will be happy to hear that you don't need to have seen Gladiator 1 to see Gladiator 2.
Oh, what a relief.
All you need to know is that Paul Mescal looks really good in his miniskirt, and that he's shirtless most of the time. He's got these beefy thighs. He's got this wonderful Romanesque nose that you just want to sit on. He's very handsome. Also in it, Denzel Washington is running around in Andre Leon Talley's old choir robes. Thinks he's in another movie. He thinks he's doing Training Day 2. He does. At no point do you believe that he's in ancient Rome. He is in New York in a Scorsese movie the entire time. And it's just funny. The two people who steal the movie are these demon twinks who play the twin Roman emperors.
Remus and Romulus?
No, Caracalla and Gaeta, who were the twin. They were evil twin Roman Empire or emperors, and it's played by Joseph Quinn and the delightful Fred Hershinger, who I talked about at length a few months ago when he was in Thelma with June Squibb. And he sort of stole the movie, and he steals the movie right out from this. He plays just this little queen, these just evil little queens who are so funny. Pedro Pascal is also in it. I do want to say that this is not a serious movie. I'm sorry, I'm banging on the table. I'm so upset about this. These are not serious people who made the movie. When I tell you that they're in the Gladiator, the Coliseum, and they're fighting. And a guy comes out riding a rhinoceros. Now, I did a little history research. At no point does anyone ever ride a rhinoceros in ancient Rome. You cannot ride rhinoceri. It's just not a thing. Now, the other thing that is just so ridiculous, they fill the Coliseum with salt water and put in about 40 great white sharks and then have them battle the great white sharks. That never happened. Nobody was ever fighting sharks in the Coliseum.
Well, how do you get sharks into the Coliseum?
Well, that's just it. Like, they make it seem like, well, we're just going to pour some water in here and then put the sharks in. Now, how do you even get no, anyway, but they also have these rabid baboons that come out, and at no point did anyone ever fight any rabid baboons. So I just want to tell you, you go into it with an open mind. This is just spectacle. It is fun. It is a mindless way to pass away a December afternoon. So go and see it, mostly for Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal, the Scal brothers.
The Pascals.
Are there any homoerotic moments or just inferred homoerotic moments?
No, well, Fred Hershinger is the emperor is gay, and he has little twinks all around him that he's always petting and kissing and everything. Oh, and actually there is a moment, Denzel at one point, it just straight up says, hey, give me a guy, give me a girl. I don't care. Just, I want someone to fuck, and so that is my Denzel impersonation. And so and then there's a couple other gay senators who are very obviously gay. And at one point, Denzel goes up and kisses him on the mouth, and they sort of cut away from that. They've talked about that in the press where they didn't think people were ready to see Denzel kissing a man. But Denzel just goes up and starts making out with his senator to get his way. Like, everybody in Rome is very ambisexual, pansexual. Yes.
Fantastic. And do you see any Oscars for anyone in this?
No.
Not even for the person who made the mini togas?
You know what? It's a bit like watching an old Sinbad movie is what it's like.
Not Sinbad the comedian, but Sinbad, yes.
Like it's like Victor Mature movie. It's like one of those sword and sandals from the 50s. It's just cheesy, yes. cheesy.
And the kids listening can Google Victor Mature. There you go. Very good. All right. Well, fascinating, James. That's Gladiator.
People don't talk about Victor Mature anymore.
No, maybe that'll be our Christmas show. All Victor Mature. The top 10 things I love about Victor.
Top 10 Victor Mature movies.
That's Gladiator 2. You don't have to see the first one, according to James St. James.
Yeah.
And let's move on in our countdown of the top 10 things that made us go wow to number 8.
I saw another hit movie that everyone's talking about. It's called Queer.
What? You saw? Nobody. It's not out yet. Nobody knew. Nobody seen. You have the skinny on it.
I do. Who is the director? What's his name? Luca
Guadagnino.
Yeah. He has also done Challengers earlier this year.
But he's most famous for Call Me by Your Name.
And Call Me by Your Name, which I've never seen Call Me by Your Name. I know.
What?
Sacrilege. I can't believe it either. But
why do we even have you on the show?
His Ben's away. It's not true. We love you, Blake. We love you.
This does seem like in the vein of that. It was beautifully shot. It was shot in Rome. A lot of it was shot in Rome. It's based on William S. Burroughs' book Queer, which is about him as a junkie living in Mexico in the 50s, and he falls in love with this Navy man and obsesses over him, and they do ayahuasca in the jungle.
And Daniel Craig is the older gentleman.
Daniel Craig plays William S. Burroughs, I guess.
Whoa, I had no idea this was a William S. Burroughs.
Drew Droege is in it, who has been on our show a few times. He's give him all the Oscars.
Oh, gorgeous. Well, good to hear. Good to hear.
I liked it. It was pretty, but it's a William S. Burroughs film, so it's kind of manic and all over the place and
I was just
weird.
I don't think that we should be telling people to run out and buy the book Queer, because if you've never read any William S. Burroughs, it's a messy, nutty stream of conscious. It's not for the uninitiated.
Exactly.
If people can follow our conversations on the Wow Report, I think they can handle those books. That's just me.
Well,
what so talk to us about James Bond, his performance. Was he invisible
buy
to
him
you?
as a gay man?
Well, the thing that Steven, my bestie, and I talked about that kind of took us out of it is he's supposed to be a junkie, like skinny and emaciated, and he has more of a boxer build.
Yeah.
So it kind of takes you out of it. Like,
about him. Yeah.
yeah. And I don't know, Jason Schwartzman was in it. He's gained a few pounds, but he is amazing in it. He was one of the best parts.
Does it have a tragic ending? How does it leave? What's the feeling you have about this? You're being very intellectual. How did it make you feel?
Well, the ending is very weird, and it's like one of those like allegorical things, I guess, where things mean something else, and so I have no idea.
Do you see Oscar nominations for anybody, for Daniel, for any of the others?
I would love to see Drew Druggy get supporting, or Jason Schwartzman.
All right. Well, we're talking about lots of movies. There's a huge movie that's out that we will be talking about later. Tease, tease, tease. But right now, we're going to take a break. Before we do, Blake, do you have anything to tell us?
I do. I want to remind everyone to sign up for our email list at worldofwonder.com to get our daily advent calendar deals that are going on now all the way through the 31st of December.
Oh.
Right. And do we have a little trivia question to take us out?
I do. What was the word of the year this year?
I think I know the answer, but I'm not going to tell you until we come back from our commercial. Don't go anywhere. The countdown continues on the Wow Report here on Radio Andy.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
We're back. It's the Wow Report with Tom Campbell, James St. James, and Blake Jacobs. We're counting down the top 10 things this week that made us go wow. Before the break, Blake asked us a trivia question. Blake?
Yeah. According to dictionary.com, what is the word of the year for 2024?
What do you think? James, you go first.
I think it's mindful, demure. I think it's demure.
I think demure should be the Wow Report's word of the year. I believe it's brain rot.
You're both kind of right. Dictionary.com's word of the year is demure. The Oxford Dictionary's word of the year is brain rot. More words of the year after a while.
Oh, fantastic. All right, let's continue the countdown. We have reached number 7.
Number 7.
I don't want to go way off script, but I did catch the 3-week cold.
Ugh.
Whatever, it's going around, and it's just a cold, and it knocks you down. You think, do I have COVID? No. Do I have a bacterial infection? No. And anyway, I've been in bed. I missed the report. I'm sorry. Thanks for carrying on without me. But I was able to pull my shit together in time to travel to Mexico for Thanksgiving to visit my dear, like 40-year friendship with my friend Johnny from college. And he lives, and it was my first time visiting San Miguel de Allende.
And where is that?
It's sort of in central Mexico. I flew from Houston to a Mexican airport that I can't pronounce because I'm that American. And then I took an hour drive with a lovely man named Juan in his Volkswagen and paid him many pesos. And it was a town settled, a small city in like 1550. So it has all of this European, it has like 5 cathedrals, all Catholic, right next to each other. I'm just wondering, like, what was the business plan for all those cathedrals, but whatever. And it's got cobblestone, there are hills, there is incredible wealth, there is, less fortunate people, but it kind of prides itself on being a place for expats to go. Mm-hmm. And
this sort of sounds a little bit like Merida, like how everyone's going to Merida.
It's one of those kind of places. Where's Trey Spiegel? Where is he?
Trey's in Merida. Brian Rabin is in Merida. Everyone seems to be going there. Yes.
And my friend Johnny is a magical creature. And Johnny lived in New York most of his adult life. But Johnny meets people, makes immediate friends. Johnny knows everything, can cook, can host, plays music, sings, like just is this Pied Piper of people. So this kind of community is perfect for him. And I was super lucky to have a little taste of it while I was down there. But it struck me from talking to people and observing that there's sort of 2 Anglo cultures down there. One are the Bohemians, which my friend Johnny belongs to. People that, we had Thanksgiving dinner with people that Johnny had met 2 weeks before. This woman, Sylvia, who's a life coach who lives in Aspen, who's like, exploring her life. Her son's 30, her husband passed away. She was fabulous and lived in this beautiful place up in the hills with this incredible view, like an acre of gardens, so many steps. And that's working at World of Wonder where the elevators were broke for 3 months. So there's them. And there was also Cynthia, who had been the original editor of Wallpaper magazine, but had worked, at Vanity Fair for years and worked, all of the circles that we know or kind of peripherally know. And Johnny had met a musician there who is a keyboardist. He brought his beautiful wife and their 20-year-old daughter, and they all spoke English, but they were very cosmopolitan. So it was this eclectic music-filled Thanksgiving, and it was just, and Johnny's an historian, so he's always looking and pointing at, at the Noah's Ark building and this arch and all that kind of stuff. Fabulous. And then what I noticed, and this is where I'm getting a little tacky, there's also kind of the cruise ship Americans. You know what I'm saying? And having just spent last year in New Zealand for Drag Race Down Under, currently playing on Wow Presents Plus with Michelle Visage, we stayed at this really fancy Hilton that we hadn't stayed at before. We'd seen it, and it's on the edge of the water, and it faces this, the Auckland Harbor and the South Seas. What we didn't know until we stayed there is it's also where cruise ships come and go.
Oh, right. Yes, I remember you telling this. And then
so one day you'd be looking at birds on the wharf, and the next day there'd be like a city of people looking into your window. And there was nothing. And when the ship would leave, I saw it live once. It was like Jurassic Park. It was like seeing like dinosaurs. They're so huge. But there was this not to be political, but there's this one time where these women were out. They're all beautiful. They're all like in their 60s, but they're gorgeous and fit and interesting. And there was some extra friends that I hadn't met yet. And some guy was kind of like talking to them, sort of a Trumpy, what I call the cruise ship people, and he started bringing up the election, and they were all keeping their distance. But there was this one friend of theirs who has this open heart, and she was trying to relate to him. And the friend of theirs said, it's hard for us to get behind that because we really value the reproductive rights of women. And he said, what do you care about reproductive rights? You're all so old. And that just sort of says it all. That's the divide between what's happening right now, between people who think about, oh, here are things. So you can't escape it, even in San Miguel. But you hear about things and you think like, oh, I want to help my daughter. I want to help womankind. I want to help mankind. Or what do you care? It's not affecting you. That's what we have. Now let's move on to number 6.
Number 6.
I just finished Astor, the new book by Anderson Cooper and his co-writer Catherine Howe. It's his follow-up to his wildly successful book about his family, the Vanderbilts, and this tells the story of the legendary first family of America, of American society, the Astors. And it's beautifully done. It's really it's fun. It's informative. It's historical, but it's also breezy and gossipy, and it's a perfect read. I really can't suggest it enough. So a lot of these stories about, especially like the Mrs. Astor, Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, who was the queen of society in the late 1800s during the Gilded Age, and she had the list of the 400, and it was the 400 people who could fit into her ballroom, and those were the creme de la creme, the tippy top of society. And if you weren't on that list, you might as well just, go out and move to Schenectady because you were nobody, right? So there's the story of her and how she and Ward McAllister came up with all of that. That's all fascinating. There's the story of John Jacob Astor the fourth, I think, who went down on the Titanic, and that's a really well-known story. There's one of the main Astors that I love, Brooke Astor. I am of the 80s when Brooke Astor was the queen of society, and I had glimpses of her every once in a while, and she was just, her wig was always slightly askew, and her lipstick was always sort of smudged, and she was this sort of dotty old lady, but she would be wearing, like a $20 million emerald necklace with the, she was just fabulous.
Is it just me knowing you? Is that the reason that I think she's the most famous Astor?
Well, for the 20th century, for the late 20s, from the 50s on, she is the most. Okay. She really reinvented the name.
I didn't know if it was everyone thought that or if I was just
Maybe because I talk about her so much.
And you dress like her, and your lipstick is always
yes. But the great thing, she was, she married him. She was Vincent Astor's third wife. And she married him, and he was a horrible husband and everything. But he died, and when he died, he said, I am going to leave you $100 million, which in those days was, like $100 billion. And he said, your only job is to get rid of it before you die. And so her what she did was she was just the fairy godmother. She was the Glinda, so to speak, the Galinda of New York City, where she just went and bestowed her money upon, the library and different places like that. But unfortunately, her story ends up very tragic. She had a son who stole from her, embezzled from her, and she ended up broke, living in pea-soaked squalor. They found her, and she was like urine-soaked diapers in a crib, and she was forced to eat cold peas out of a can. They would just give her a can of peas, and she eat it with like a fork. I mean, like, it was just terrible what happened. She had dementia, and her last probably 10 years were very sad. There's also there's just a lot of these stories about Astor orphans and Astor people, Astors who go mad, and Astors, broken love. There's just all the whole family going back like 400 years. It's just absolutely brilliant and fascinating. The rise and fall of An American Fortune.
Do you think there's another Astor novel or Astor book in Anderson's future?
He's done the Vanderbilts and the Astors, and I think there are the Skirmers. There's the
right. I get it. It's different families.
I mean, he can do the whole, all of the different, the Carnegies, the Mellons. There's the million dynasties to
the Rockefellers.
The Rockefellers. There you go.
It's
Happy. Oh God, how much do we love Happy Rockefeller? I mean, remember she was the one in who the period thing in View.
That came to my mind when I was in Mexico for some reason. I don't know why. I just thought about that scene and I got disgusted. And the Gilded Age is coming back, so it's very.
And in fact, the one of the main stories about Mrs. Astor was that Mrs. Alva Vanderbilt, had this mansion that was the biggest mansion in New York, and everyone wanted to go to the ball, but Mrs. Astor's daughter wasn't allowed to go because the Vanderbilts were still not chic. They were still not on the 400. And so but the daughter was like, Mama, I want to go. And she said, well, you can't go because Mrs. Vanderbilt has never been to tea. And so she had to invite Mrs. Vanderbilt to tea. And that's how the Vanderbilts became the Vanderbilts. They were suddenly allowed into society because Mrs. Astor had Mrs. Vanderbilt over for tea. And that's the first season of the Gilded Age. That's the story that they're telling.
Very good. Historical spoiler alert. Great. Let's move on now to number 5.
Number 5.
Well, we talked about the word of the year, according to dictionary.com, demure. Now I wanted to talk about the 5 other nominees.
Okay.
Yes.
The next one was brain rot, which Tom, you talked about, which was the number 1 word on the Oxford Dictionary's word of the year.
No, wait a minute. This is so weird because I've never heard anyone say brain rot. In what context are people talking about brain rot?
I mean, I had heard people say brain rot, but I didn't think it was any
young people in regard
right.
to TikTok and social media, and it's all brain rot.
There we go. Okay. Yes, social media is causing the kids to have brain rot.
But in the 90s, video games were causing brain rot.
And
in
comic
the 70s,
books in the 50s.
TV. Yeah.
And look at us now.
The next nominee, Brat.
Okay, sure. I would have thought that might have been number 1. Yeah,
it should be. Let's make a stink. Okay, go ahead.
Next up, extreme weather. Another strange one.
Well, there is extreme weather every.
Yeah, but like more so this year than any other year. I don't know.
It's getting worse.
It was a political football. Let's just say that.
Well, the next couple are kind of political. Midwest Nice.
Midwest Nice.
Midwest Nice. Sarah Haynes is Midwest Nice on The View, where you don't buy it for a second. I'm sorry, I'll never be on The View, but she always pretends like I'm from Iowa. I'm an independent, and I don't. She is Midwestern Nice, if you know what I'm. That is one of those bless your heart, honey things where she says it, she doesn't really mean it.
So they seem nice, but they voted for Trump. That's Midwest.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes, okay. That's Midwestern Nice.
Well, dictionary.com says in August, Vice President Kamala announced Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate, generating discussions about Walz's pleasant personality. Originating in the Midwestern United States, Midwest Nice describes a courteous and agreeable manner, often involving self-depreciation, politeness, and avoidance of conflict.
Well,
Oh,
James
well,
St. James has added a dimension to it, so I like.
Yeah.
I like
yeah,
James'
no, I think
darkness.
everything I just said was wrong because to me, Midwestern nice is like that Southern nice.
You
where
took it as the other way of
Yeah,
taking it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
the
language
la-
continues to evolve, and James is doing it right here on the WoW Report. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Exactly. Last up, weird.
Oh, sure.
Weird.
Unfortunately, weird didn't stick. Weird, like so much of this, I would have a different meaning if the election was different. I'm sorry to be a
Well,
broken record.
what's weird is that, you know, when Tim Walz first came out and he was sort of an attack dog and then they pulled him back. They said, you're going too far. And so you didn't see Tim Walz those last couple months. And I think if they had let him continue to be an attack dog, things might've been different.
Yeah.
Well, we'll never know, I guess.
Well, sticks
Welcome
and
to
stones-
hell.
So sticks and stones may break my bones, but the word of the year will never hurt me. Something like that. Something like that.
Something.
All right. We're going to continue with the countdown after this break. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the WoW Report on Radio Andy.
You're listening to World of Wonders WoW Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back. You're listening to the WoW Report right here on Radio Andy. We're counting down the top 10 things this week that made us go wow. And we have reached number 4.
Number 4.
I watched In Vogue the 90s on Hulu and Disney Plus. It's available on both of them.
I watched this. I loved it.
Well, that's interesting to me because it's not quite up your alley, but then again, you are a 90s child. So
Exactly.
I guess it is. Years ago, World of Wonder, Randy and Fenton did a documentary with Anna Wintour called In Vogue, The Editor's Eye. And it was telling of famous issues and famous photo shoots and famous covers as told through the lens of the editors who worked on it. And I think apparently Anna had such a good time doing it that they've expanded that into this series, which is pretty much the same thing. It is In Vogue, the famous photo shoots and models and everything that they worked with in the 90s. So this is a series that they've stretched it out, and each episode is a different aspect of the 90s.
Do you remember what they are? I don't remember.
Yes, I do. In fact, I've made notes. So the first episode is the rise of the supermodel.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, it's Anna Wintour coming into Vogue in the late 80s and how how she came to power. But then it's also the supermodels. It's Linda, Naomi, all of them talking about some of the famous shoots that they did, how they came to power with that George Michael video, how important that was. Linda saying that she wouldn't get out of bed for $10,000 for less than $10,000. All of those stories and everything the models tell. They talk about the famous shoots and everything. It's just fascinating. Then the next episode is the rise of Kate Moss and how she just was a disruptor in a way that had all the other supermodels shaking because she was brought about the waif look, the heroin chic, all of that.
Was that the grunge episode?
It was the grunge episode, yeah. And how just Kate was everything that Linda, Naomi, and all those women were big, powerful Amazons, and Kate was just this little girl. And how she, it was started with the Marky Mark, Calvin Klein, because nobody would touch her until that, and then she became, the most powerful model in the world. Then there was an episode about hip hop's rise and how that influenced,
that one was really interesting to me.
It was interesting to me too, and I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. But that had Lil Kim and Mary J. Blige, Missy Elliott, and everybody talking about how they at this point Vogue wasn't very much into the hip hop scene, just like they didn't like grunge, but at a certain point they had no choice but to embrace it. And once they embraced it, it opened up all sorts of avenues that they didn't know that they had, and it brought in a whole new audience. And just seeing Little Kim, she was so fun. She was really, really great. There's another episode about the Met Ball. And Anna took over the Met Ball, and that one's really fascinating to me. And I don't mean to say anything bad about Anna. God forbid she's listening right now.
Yes, she is.
Yes, I'm sure. But the Met Ball started in the 1940s, It was just a little society thing. And then it wasn't really much until Diana Vreeland took it over in the 70s. And that's when she started inviting Cher and Bob Mackie and all those types of people. And it really got to be something. And then after Diana died, Pat Buckley, oh God, Pat Buckley. I love me some Pat Buckley. It was just she was the socialite. Next to Brooke Astor, it was Pat Buckley and Nan Kempner, right? In the 80s and 90s. Well, Pat Buckley took it over. And so it's weird that this episode talks about the 40s and then it skips over Diana altogether and goes right to Pat Buckley. And you see Pat Buckley at the side. You don't even get a full picture of Pat. And then it goes straight into Anna, how she reinvented it and everything like that. So I have a feeling that Anna doesn't like Diana. Nowhere is Diana ever mentioned in any of these series, because I think that she's still living in the shadow of Diana Vreeland a little bit, Anna Wintour, and so she doesn't want any comparisons of Diana in anything that she does. So they just skipped over Diana altogether and went straight to Pat Buckley. So I thought that was sort of a fascinating little insider thing that only I am telling you right now.
Well, is that because it was set in the 90s?
No, well, Anna took over in the 90s from Pat Buckley. Pat Buckley took over from Diana. And so Diana,
maybe there's Vogue the 80s and Vogue the 70s coming up.
Well, that's the other thing about this show.
I would love that, because when we were talking about it, I said I loved it, and you were like, of course you do. I loved Vogue 80s, but I was like, well, I only know Vogue in the 90s.
Well, but here's the funny thing, though, is that the very first moments of the show, they're talking about the 90s and how they say it was just an explosion. It was the first time in history that art, fashion, movies, music, video all came together in one glorious explosion. And I was like, no. That's the 80s and MTV, when fashion, art, and music all came together. But then also it's the 60s. So I guess for the purposes of the show, they had to say that the 90s was the first time it ever happened. But to me, it was really the 80s. So
you know too much. You know too much, James. You know too much.
I know too much. I know too much sometimes.
And to Tom, it was the 1890s.
Oh, the gay 90s. James makes them gay. What's the name of the documentary again?
It's called In Vogue, the 90s on Hulu. And it's really just a fun trip down memory lane.
6 thumbs up. It sounds like 6 thumbs up.
Yes.
All right.
Blake, you really enjoyed it?
I loved.
Good.
Let's move on to number 3.
Number 3.
As we speak right now, around the universe, the Meet the Queens video is dropping for season 17 of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Can you imagine?
Season 17. That doesn't count the All-Stars. That's just regular seasons. And, you know, I'm privileged to work on the show, and we produced it last summer, and it's coming in, and it is a tremendous season, and you only have to wait until January 3rd. It is a top of the year thing to change your life. Guest judges are being announced a little bit later, which amazing guest judges from all different backgrounds. Just incredible. The support that celebrities from all different, people just love Drag Race and want to be on it. It's so incredible. And I don't know how our casting people do it. I don't know how Theron does it, but we have the most amazing group of queens. They are young. They're younger every year. But, and these names, what I love is right at this moment in time, these names mean nothing to you. And in 3 months, they will be part of the gay pop, culture iconography. And I'm going to say their names because we got some good names. Because, we screen for a lot more than just the names, but there's nothing like a good drag name. And I'm going to give you some examples. Are you ready?
Yes.
Acacia Forgot. Arietti, nothing to it. Arietti, but it's nice. It rolls off the tongue. Crystal Envy. Hormona Lisa.
Oh, that's right. Like hormone.
Yes,
Lisa.
Hormona Lisa. Jules Sparkles lives up to her name. Then there's simply Joella. There's Corey King. That's with K's. Corey King. Lana Geray. I love it.
That's a good one.
Then there is Lexi Love, a queen from Kentucky who you will love. There's Lucky Stars with 3 Z's. Anya Nerve. There's Sam Starr. And there's Susie Toot, which is kind of a great name. And by the way, Susie Toot, you know what she looks like already. Susie Toot, you know exactly who you're buying. And last but not least, and it could be bleeped in some time zones, is Lydia B. Collins, but the B stands for butthole. So it's Lydia Butthole Collins. And I have to say, there's times when contestants have had names like testicles and RuPaul called them like Tessa T. Like he just wants to not be saying dirty words out loud a lot. But he luxuriates in Lydia Butthole Collins. We just love it. We lean into it. We can't get enough of Lydia Butthole Collins. So I'm saying it's a big splash. It's H2O. My God. There's a water theme. There's a twist that involves water and Michelle Visage. And I've already said too much. It premieres January 3rd on MTV and Wow Presents Plus around the world. And there's lots of stuff dropping between now and then to get to know the queens, to get to know the twists, to get to know the judges. So very excited to be bringing you a new season of RuPaul's Drag Race. All right, let's move on now to number 2.
Number 2.
I don't know if you were aware, but last weekend was Le Bal de Debutante in Paris. It is the biggest, most major debutante coming out ball on the planet. It has been for many, many moons now. It is usually like the daughters of European royalty, Russian oligarchs, Saudi royal family members, tech billionaires' kids. It is the creme de la creme of the billionaire class, right? And lots of people with multi-hyphenate names like Prince Ludwig von Schweitzer-Hohenhausen, du Saxe von Coburg, Bin Laden IV. Like names like that, right? It's sort of like what you're used to.
And Lydia Butthole Collins, I believe, was also
Lydia Butthole Collins. This year, the Deb of the year, the one that everyone had their eyes on, was Little Apple Martin, our very own Apple Martin, Gwyneth and Chris Martin's daughter, who is the spitting image of her mother. She wore a lovely strapless sky blue custom Valentino gown, in case you were wondering. Oh, and her date was Count Leo Henkel von Donnersmarck. Okay, in case you don't know the von Donnersmarcks of
Baltimore.
The Baltimore von Donnersmarck. Yes. There was a bit of a kerfluffle in which Apple got a lot of attention, a lot of negative attention. They said she was being a mean girl when there was another Deb named Eleanor Lopin de Montmartre. Of the Philadelphia Montmartre, and she was posing for a photographer, and Apple pushed her out of the way and started posing up a storm herself. And people were like, "No,
didn't that happen to you?"
Well, it's happened to me many times with Diane Brill, Lisa E, Anita Sarko. I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna come out and say it. But anyway, so Apple pushes the girl out of the way and starts posing up a storm and makes all these like wild faces for the camera. And everyone said that was a bridge too far. Apple, how dare you? And the thing is, and it got a lot of press, and the whole debutante ball got a lot of press this year in the Hello and Paris Match and Daily Mail and things like that. And the thing is, I'm not angry that the debutante balls still exist. I mean, they have their place, they're fine, everything like that. But I have a feeling that it should probably be behind closed doors, and it shouldn't be there should be no paparazzis in this climate right now where so many people are suffering and so many people are broke and things like that. It feels a bit Marie Antoinette-ish to me.
A little bit. It feels a lot that way. It was the minute you said it, I wasn't aware of it until you just said it now. It's like, how do you rationalize that? How do you
exactly? And how do you rationalize sending your child off to something like it feels a little tone deaf for Gwyneth and Chris to
she's usually so down to earth.
Well, I might not order my Goop takeaway food for a week just in protest. I'm not going to order my Goop salad.
But poor Eleanor Lopin de Montmartre.
Alas.
She just, went through it.
Well, James, thank you for keeping us abreast on the social register. Thank you very, very much. International. We have reached the time in the show. We're going to take our last little break before we reveal the number one thing that is defying gravity this week on the Wow Report. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
We are back. It's the Wow Report on Radio Andy. I'm Tom Campbell with James St. James and Blake Jacobs. And we have reached the point in the countdown where we're going to talk about the number one thing this week that made us go wow. Thank you.
Number 1.
Can we hold some space for Wicked?
Yes.
Yes. Now, I've seen Wicked. James, have you seen Wicked?
I've seen it.
I saw
Blake?
it last night.
You did.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
All right.
before because obviously Tom and I sobbed like babies, and we sang along, and we know everything about it. Blake, have
Just
you
to
ever
play
seen-
a little bit of Devil's Advocate. I've never seen the musical before.
Okay.
I've never read the book before, so I have no idea about the story going into it, which I loved. I loved and hated this movie. I bet you can guess which parts I hated.
Every time someone broke into a song, you cringed.
Except for Popular and Defying Gravity.
Okay.
The other songs were kind of mid, and I was like, oh, shut up.
But wait a minute,
Because
you
half the
didn't
time
like
I couldn't
Dancing
understand
Alone.
what they were even saying.
Stop. Dancing Through Life, Jonathan Bailey didn't get your motor running.
Not at the time, but now knowing what I do know about what's going to happen in part 2, I'm more into it. You know what I mean?
But to me, one of the Ariana was hysterical all through it. She was so funny
and so
good.
beautiful.
And so
Yeah.
beautiful, popular. It just like all through it, I was just giggling hysterically. So funny. But Jonathan Bailey wasn't a revelation to you, because to me, he just was such a superstar coming out of that.
He
Are you
has
asking-
been so beautiful for so long, but
So
this
beautiful.
was the moment that he emerged as the number one alpha, beautiful man on the face of the earth.
He's like the new Prince Charming.
Let's talk about Cynthia Erivo. Ariana, obviously, everyone knows. Cynthia Erivo, I've seen it twice now, and Cynthia Erivo was amazing both times, but the second time just stole my heart so deeply. I was in the parking lot this morning for an extra 10 minutes before I dared walk up the 5 flights of stairs, listening to I'm Not That Girl. Oh my God. Like Blake, and I say this with
I'm
love.
Not That Girl is Rizzo singing
There are worse things I could do.
It is. To me, that was that Grease moment right there. Yeah.
And Blake, I know this is a lot to ask of you, but if you there's so much to unpack in every song. The lyrics are so clever and smart that if you spend a little time, if you saw it again, I'd see it with you. If you wanted to listen to it in the car, in the parking lot, everything's so beautiful. And my complaint, and it's not even a complaint, is I love the musical so much. And when I go see it live and you get the whole story, in one sitting, you're just like torn apart. There's so much emotion. And the movie is a different beast. It's so, but sometimes they make things spectacular, it loses its soul. This just became one of the most spectacular visual movies and visual storytelling I've ever seen in my life. From the running down the fields of different colored tulips to the library dance scene where things go around, and it's just
I'll tell you, one of the songs that I never really paid attention to until this was The Wiz and I, where she's running through the field and she's talking about all the things, and she says, I have this vision and it's a little cloudy, but everybody in Oz is going to be celebrating me one day, and I don't know what it's about. And then you realize that it's because she dies, and then she says it, and I'm a puddle just thinking about it, and you're like, oh no,
it's so clever. And for my generation, and maybe James's, but it's like The Wizard of Oz was something that came on once a year. You couldn't binge it. And so we would watch it every year as a special event. And it also marked my mind growing. Like I thought, like 1 year you'd be 4, and then 5, you go like, oh, the Scarecrow is actually the guy who works at the farm. And then I found out, because we had black and white TV, that it's in color, and that Judy Garland is. So every year was not only that you learn the story, which is a beautiful fable, Wizard of Oz, it also was like marks of my cognition. And to have this piece of art, Wicked, come along that takes what we all know so deep in our DNA and retells it and makes us question crazily in this time authority and authoritarianism.
Well,
Yes.
the main takeaway, especially from the book, is that what we think of as evil is often just knowledge. It's the person who has the knowledge is the person that we demonize.
Yes.
and that what we think of as good is often not good at all, and they're the ones who are the bad guys, you know, the Wiz and all those things. But well, first of all, they take the train to Oz. Why didn't Glinda ever tell Dorothy that there was a train? You know, she makes Dorothy walk the road when there's a train going straight to Oz. So they go to Oz, and within 10 minutes,
sorry, I have to take that. Okay. Keep going.
But within 10 minutes, Elphaba realizes that it's all a sham. Like they should have maybe been with the wizard for a little while longer. They sort of made that, they rushed that a little bit. The discovery that he was the bad guy and that Miss Moore.
Although I have to say, and you know, everyone was afraid, oh my God, it's part one. Oh my God, it's so long. But people have been pretty pleased with the pacing and having seen it a second time, it's rich. It's worth seeing. You know, it is definitely something you can see time and time again. I want to end,
like I said, I'm like, you know, I'm all for. I thought the pacing was bad. That's just this one little part that I thought was.
You're welcome to have critiques. Absolutely. The one thing I'll end with, and it makes me cry, is there's that moment when they are starting to bond, Elphaba and Galinda, and she says, you know, what's your secret to Elphaba? And Elphaba, you know, says, my father hates me. She goes, that's not the secret. And she reveals the tragedy of her sister in the white, and she's devastated. And Galinda says to her a line that just, I don't know why, it just resonates with me. And she goes, just because it's your secret doesn't make it the truth.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, that's a fucking 10 years of therapy right there. I don't know.
Yeah.
This when that line and things like that throughout the movie make me feel explosively like just so much that I love this movie, and it is the new classic. And I'm glad no one ever remade The Wizard of Oz. I think it should live in its own, but this is Wizard of Oz for a new generation, you know, and
Right.
and it's I can't wait for part 2.
And I do think that everyone over the age of 16 probably should read the book, because it's very different than the play in the movie. But it's a deep meditation on what we thought, the things that we think we know that we don't really understand, and it's fascinating. So
I'm feeling slightly book shamed, but I'll take that. I'll take that to heart. Thank you.
No. And Tom, I think it is something that you would really get into. And Blake, there's you know, animal orgies and stuff in it for you too. So
and no songs.
And no songs and animal orgies. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm reading it.
You haven't heard the last of me in terms of the soundtrack. We're going to spend some time together. Thank you, James. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Fenton out there making the world a better place. Can't wait to see you back here on the Wow Report. Everyone listening, come back. We'll be here. And until we see you and hear you again, please go out and do something that makes the world go wow. Bye-bye.